All right, welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're diving into something that's been popping up more and more lately, especially when it comes to planning for your financial future. We're talking gold IRAs.
Yeah, it seems like they're getting a lot of buzz.
Definitely. So we went ahead and did some digging, and we're basing our deep dive today on the Gold IRA guide, what it is and how it works. Hopefully by the end of this, we can cut through some of that, financial jargon and give everyone a clearer picture.
Absolutely. No need to get bogged down in the technicalities.
Exactly. So to kick things off, maybe you can give us the elevator pitch. What exactly is a Gold IRA?
Well, in a nutshell, a Gold IRA is a self-directed retirement account. Now, that might sound a little intimidating, but really all it means is that you have more say in how your retirement investments are managed.
So a bit more control than your typical 401k or traditional IRA.
Right. The real twist with a Gold IRA is that instead of just investing in stocks and bonds, you can actually hold physical precious metals.
So like actual gold bars and coins.
You got it. Gold, silver, platinum, palladium. The real deal.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm already starting to see how that could be appealing to some folks. Now, the guide mentions that there are different types of gold IRAs. Can you break those down for us?
Sure. The main ones you'll come across are traditional Gold IRAs, Roth Gold IRAs, and then there are SEP Gold IRAs.
SEP.
Yeah, SEP stands for Simplified Employee Pension. These are typically for, self-employed people or small business owners. Each type has its own set of rules, and especially when it comes to taxes.
I bet. Taxes always seem to complicate things, don't they?
Yeah, they definitely can. But the good news is having different options means you can choose the one that best fits your situation, depending on your income, your tax bracket, all that.
All right, so before we get too deep into the weeds with the different types, let's zoom out for a second. For someone who's just starting to learn about gold IRAs, what's the main draw? Why would you even consider putting physical gold into your retirement plan?
I'd say the biggest reason people get interested in gold IRAs is diversification. You know the old saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Makes sense.
Well, precious metals, particularly gold, they tend to move a bit differently than the stock market.
So if the market takes a dip, your gold might not be affected as much.
Exactly. It's about, creating a bit of a safety net, especially if you're worried about economic uncertainty or inflation.
That's something a lot of people are worried about these days, for sure.
Definitely.
So it sounds like gold IRAs could be a good way to balance things out.
Potentially, yeah. But there are definitely some things to consider, some nuances that are important to understand, and that's what we're going to unpack today.
All right, let's get into it then. So, first things first, how is a gold IRA different from a traditional IRA, the kind a lot of people are already familiar with?
Well, the main difference is in the assets themselves. In a traditional IRA, you're typically holding what are called paper assets, things like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, that sort of thing. And these are usually held and managed through a brokerage firm.
Right.
But with a gold IRA, you're actually holding the physical precious metals. You're not just investing in a piece of paper that represents gold. You actually own the gold itself.
Okay, that makes sense. So how does that actually work? I mean, you can't just keep gold bars in your regular bank account, right?
Exactly. And that's where the idea of a custodian comes in.
A custodian.
Yeah, think of them as a specialized financial institution that's equipped to handle, precious metals. They're responsible for managing the account and making sure everything's on the up and up, especially according to the IRS rules, which are pretty strict when it comes to gold IRAs.
Oh, I bet. The IRS always has their eyes on everything.
For sure. Now, another big difference is that with a gold IRA, you can't just store your metals wherever you want. The IRS requires that they be kept in an approved depository.
A depository, what's that like? Some kind of super secure vault?
Pretty much, yeah. It's a high-security facility that meets specific standards for safeguarding precious metals. Think Fort Knox-level security.
Wow. Okay, so you need this special custodian, and your gold has to be in this Fort Knox-like depository. It sounds a bit more involved than just buying some stocks online.
It definitely has some extra layers, but on the plus side, the tax advantages are pretty similar to a traditional IRA. Both offer what's called tax-deferred growth, meaning you don't pay taxes on any earnings from your investments until you start withdrawing the money in retirement.
Oh, okay. So that part's the same.
Right.
All right. Well, now that we've got the basics down, let's dive into those different types of gold IRAs. You mentioned traditional, Roth, and SEP. Let's start with traditional gold IRAs. What do those look like?
So with a traditional gold IRA, your contributions are usually made pre-tax. What that means is the money you put in can actually lower your taxable income for the year. which can be a nice little tax break right now.
Oh, so you get a potential tax break up front.
Exactly. And then, as we mentioned, any growth within the account isn't taxed until you withdraw it later on in retirement.
So you defer those taxes until later.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Now, what about the Roth Gold IRA? How is that different?
With a Roth Gold IRA, the contributions you make are after tax, meaning you've already paid taxes on that money. So you don't get that immediate deduction like you do with a traditional IRA. But the advantage here is that if you meet certain requirements when you take withdrawals in retirement, those withdrawals, including all the growth your investments have made, can be completely tax-free.
So, no taxes on the withdrawals later on. That sounds pretty attractive.
It can be, especially if you think you might be in a higher tax bracket during retirement than you are now.
Right, right. And didn't the guide mention something about no required minimum distributions with a Roth? Yeah, that's another perk. With traditional IRAs, you have to start taking distributions at a certain age, but with a Roth, you don't. It gives you more flexibility to manage your money in retirement.
So more control. Got it. Now, let's talk about that third type. SEP Gold IRAs. Those are for self-employed folks and small business owners, right?
That's right.
What's the main benefit there?
The big advantage with SFPs is that you can contribute a lot more money each year compared to traditional or Roth IRAs.
Oh, so higher contribution limits.
Yeah, which can be a huge plus if you're self-employed and, maybe don't have a traditional employer-sponsored retirement plan.
Makes sense. And how does the whole tax thing work with SEP Gold IRAs?
Similar to a traditional IRA, your contributions are tax deductible. So you lower your taxable income now. And just like the other types, the money in the account grows tax deferred until retirement.
Okay, so it's like a souped-up traditional IRA, basically.
In a way, yeah. Higher contribution limits, same tax advantages.
Gotcha. Okay, so we've got these three different types, each with its own pros and cons, depending on your circumstances. Now, let's say someone's listening to this and thinking, okay, a Gold IRA sounds pretty good. How do I actually get started with one?
Well, the Gold IRA guide actually lays out a really helpful 6-step process for setting one up.
Let's go through it then. What's step one?
Step 1 is to figure out your allocation.
Allocation.
Yeah, basically, how much of your overall retirement savings do you want to put into precious metals? Some people might want to go all in on gold, but others might want a mix of maybe gold, silver, platinum, palladium. It really depends on your investment strategy and your overall risk tolerance.
So it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach.
Definitely not. And it's generally a good idea to keep things balanced. Remember that eggs in one basket analogy.
Right.
You don't want to put all your faith in just one asset.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, what's step two?
Step 2 is finding a trustworthy Gold IRA company.
Okay, so this is like finding a financial advisor who specializes in Gold IRAs.
It's similar, yeah. This company is going to be your main point of contact throughout the whole process. They'll help you set up the account, guide you through funding it, whether that's with new money or rollovers from other accounts, and they'll also help you buy the actual precious metals.
So they're like your guide and your advocate throughout the whole thing.
Exactly. A good Gold IRA company can really take a lot of the stress and confusion out of the process.
I bet. Okay, so you've got your allocation figured out. You found a good company to work with. What's next?
Step 3 is choosing a custodian.
Oh, right. We talked about those earlier. Those are the folks who manage the account and make sure everything's kosher with the IRS, right?
Right. And it's super important to choose a custodian who has specific experience with Gold IRAs.
Why is that so crucial?
Because they're the ones who are going to make sure you're following all those, very specific IRS rules. Everything from the types of metals you hold to where they're stored has to be done just right.
And you mentioned the IRS can be pretty strict about all that.
They definitely are. If you mess up, you could face some hefty penalties, fines and stuff, and you definitely don't want that. So it's important to have a custodian who knows the ins and outs of Gold IRAs like the back of their hand.
So they're like the IRS whisperers.
Exactly. And often, the Gold IRA company you choose will have recommendations for custodians they work with regularly.
Would you say that's a good route to go?
It can be, yeah. It often makes the setup process smoother since everyone's already on the same page.
Makes sense. Okay, so now you've got your custodian lined up. What's step 4?
Funding the account.
Right. Got to put some money in there.
Exactly. There are a couple of ways to do this. You can contribute new funds directly, just like you would with a regular IRA.
Okay, that's straightforward enough.
Or you can transfer or roll over funds from an existing retirement account. Like if you have an old 401k from a previous job or something like that.
So you can move money from one retirement account into a gold IRA.
Yeah. And the guide makes a distinction between a transfer and a rollover. A direct transfer is when the money moves directly from one institution to another without you ever actually touching it. Usually less paperwork that way.
And a rollover is when you actually get the money in your hands.
Right. And then you have to reinvest it in your new Gold IRA within a certain time frame, usually 60 days, according to the IRS. If you miss that deadline, you could end up owing taxes and even penalties on that money.
Yikes. So rollovers are a bit trickier.
It can be, yeah. It's best to get guidance from your current IRA custodian, and, the Gold IRA company can usually help you out with the paperwork, too.
Good to know. All right, so you've got your account funded. You're ready to buy some gold. What's step 5?
Step 5 is purchasing the actual precious metals. But there's a catch. The IRS is very picky about what kind of metals you can hold in a Gold IRA.
Really? What do they care about?
Purity, mainly. The metals have to meet certain minimum purity standards. For gold, it's usually 99.5% pure. For silver, it's 99.9%. And for platinum and palladium, it's 99.95%.
Wow, so that old gold coin I found in my grandma's attic probably wouldn't cut it.
Probably not, unless it's, a specific type of coin that meets the IRS requirements.
So how do you know what you can and can't buy?
Don't worry, the Gold IRA company will have a list of approved products. Usually, it's government-minted coins and bars that meet the standards.
Okay, so no need to go digging for gold yourself.
Nope, you can leave that to the professionals.
Makes sense. All right, final step. What is it?
Step 6 is storing your precious metals.
Right, we talked about the whole approved depository thing earlier.
Exactly. And this is where things get really serious. The IRS is adamant that your Gold IRA metals have to be stored in an approved depository, and that depository has to be managed by a licensed custodian.
So no keeping them at home, even if you have a really good safe.
No way. Home storage is a big no-no with Gold IRAs. You could get hit with some major penalties if you try that.
Okay, so it's all about security and following the rules to a T.
You got it. And these approved depositories are serious business. They're like those bank vaults you see in the movies with all the high-tech security systems and everything. They're designed to keep your metals safe and sound.
Sounds like it. All right, well, now that we've covered the whole process of setting up a gold IRA, let's talk about why someone might want to do that in the first place. What are the potential benefits?
Well, the guide highlights a few key advantages. One of the big ones is that gold is often seen as a hedge against inflation.
A hedge.
Yeah. Basically, it means that when the cost of living goes up and your dollar doesn't buy as much, the price of gold tends to rise along with it.
So it helps protect your money from losing its value.
Exactly. Gold's value isn't tied to any particular currency or government, so it can hold its own even when things get shaky in the economy.
Interesting. Okay, what's another benefit?
Diversification.
We talked about that a bit earlier.
Yeah, it's a big one. Gold often moves in the opposite direction of stocks and bonds. So when those markets might be going down, gold might be going up.
Ah, so it helps balance things out.
Exactly. It can potentially smooth out the bumps in your overall retirement portfolio and reduce your overall risk.
Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Well, gold is also considered a relatively safe and stable asset. It's been a store of value for centuries, unlike paper money, which can be printed like crazy and lose its value pretty easily.
I guess that's why they call it good as gold, huh?
Yeah, pretty much. Gold has a long history of holding its value, even in times of crisis and uncertainty. And that can provide a lot of peace of mind when you're thinking about your long-term financial security.
Those are some pretty compelling arguments for gold. But I'm sure there are some potential downsides too, right?
Of course. Every investment has its risks. The guide talks about market volatility.
Even gold isn't immune to that, huh?
Nope. Gold prices can go up and down just like any other asset. It's affected by all sorts of things, global events, economic conditions, even just investor sentiment.
So you could buy gold when it's high and then see the price drop.
It's possible, yeah. That's why it's important to think long-term when it comes to gold. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme.
And it probably goes back to that idea of diversification again, right?
Definitely. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, even if that basket is full of gold.
Good advice. Okay, what about fees and costs? Are there any hidden expenses with gold IRAs that people should be aware of?
There are definitely some fees involved. You'll typically have custodian fees, storage fees for keeping your metals in that secure depository, and there might also be some dealer markups when you buy the gold.
So it's important to factor all those costs in.
Absolutely. And to shop around and compare different Gold IRA companies and custodians to make sure you're getting a fair deal.
Transparency is key.
Definitely. You want to know exactly what you're paying for.
Okay, now, you've mentioned the IRS a few times, and I have a feeling they're pretty involved in this whole Gold IRA thing.
Yeah.
How important is it to stay on the right side of the IRS with all this?
It's absolutely crucial. The IRS has tons of regulations regarding Gold IRAs, and you don't want to mess around with them.
What kind of things do they regulate?
Everything. The types of metals you can hold, the purity requirements, the storage arrangements, even the reporting procedures. You have to follow their rules to the letter, or you could face some serious penalties.
Okay, so definitely not an area to cut corners.
Yo. And that's why it's so important to work with a reputable Gold IRA company and custodian who really know their stuff. They can help you navigate all those regulations and make sure you're in compliance.
So they're not just there to help you set up the account. They're also there to keep you out of trouble with the IRS.
Exactly. They're like your Gold IRA guardian angels, making sure everything's on the up and up.
Good to know. All right, last question on potential downsides. The guide mentioned something about liquidity. What does that mean in the context of Gold IRAs?
Liquidity basically means how easy it is to turn an asset into cash. And while gold is valuable, selling it isn't always as quick or easy as, say, selling stocks online. You have to find a buyer, arrange transportation, all that.
So it's not as simple as just clicking a button.
Not quite. But there are ways to make it easier. A lot of Gold IRA companies offer buyback programs.
Meaning they'll buy your gold back from you.
Exactly. It's a more streamlined way to sell your gold if you need to access the cash. So when you're choosing a company, it's worth looking into whether they offer a buyback program and what their terms are.
Good tip. All right, well, we've covered a lot of ground today. Any final thoughts for our listeners who are considering a Gold IRA?
I'd say the main takeaway is that a Gold IRA can be a good way to diversify your retirement savings and potentially protect yourself against inflation, but it's not something to jump into blindly. Do your research, understand the risks, and make sure you're working with trustworthy professionals who can guide you through the process.
And don't forget about all those IRS rules.
Definitely not. The last thing you want is to end up owing the IRS a bunch of money because you didn't cross your T's and dot your I's.
Great advice. Well, thanks for walking us through all this today. I think our listeners have a much better understanding of Gold IRAs now.
My pleasure.
And for everyone listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you have any experience with Gold IRAs? Are you considering adding one to your retirement plan? Let us know in the comments. And as always, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.